The Centresteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics and Knightsbridge Overland.
This month's Centresteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic vehicles from Europe and South America and has a rotating collection of rare and unique vehicles in their showroom located in Virginia, just 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. Visit www.cwclassics.com to view their current inventory of classic vehicles. Thanks, Commonwealth Classics, for your continued support of the podcast.
The Centresteer podcast, a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners.
Welcome to the Centresteer podcast number 117 for December 2022. Centresteer is a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners. I'm your host, John Costage. Joining me over Zoom, Harold, Morgan, and Dixon. We've got the full team back together.
We got a full house.
How's everybody doing on this fine mid-December night when we're recording?
Getting ready for the big weather this weekend.
Yeah, it's actually starting to seem like December.
Yeah, we're going to celebrate the holiday by freezing our asses off.
You people in the deep south, we've had snow here for a while, and
it's not the
lovely
snow.
Frozen weather.
It's not the snow. It's the fact that the temperature is going to go from 40 to 4 in 2 hours. It's the wind.
Wind isn't helpful.
Wind is almost never helpful unless you're on the sea in a boat with fabric propulsion.
And even then, you don't want too much.
It's the end of the calendar year, which means Jeff Aronson joins us for the State of the Rover. I don't know, it's a working title. Still trying to come up with what to call it. Stay tuned after the news to hear Jeff's thoughts on JLR's visibility, its language change around the Rover community, and what to expect in Rover's 75th year. Thank you for listening, and a happy and safe holiday season to all our listeners. Thanks again to Bob for the brown water. Bob commented, got an email from Bob. He said, how nice to have a full house with all four of you on the podcast. This was for November. And the perspective and insight for all of you provide is greatly appreciated. Refreshing. While I will never be a baron, I'm very proud to have plentiful quantities of brown water on hand at all times. Enjoy.
Thank you, Lord Brownwater.
I still like Baron of Brownwater.
Oh, yeah. He is the Baron, and hence he's Lord Brownwater.
And a special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. We appreciate your continued support of the podcast. You can support the podcast as a Patreon supporter. You can buy a shirt, sticker, tee, which is like Patreon, but you get to choose the amount as the Baron of Brownwater does. Visit our webpage for details and links. And as a bonus for our Patreon supporters, most guests answer our 10 questions, which is a quick fire round of questions and answers. And we'll post Jeff Aronson's round in a few weeks. 2023 is upon us, and that means it is Land Rover's 75th year. We're inviting all Land Rover owners to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix in July of 2023, especially Series and Defender owners. You have 6 months to get your Rover ready. Did you hear that, Morgan? 6 months.
I'm gritting my teeth.
Oh, he'll have it ready for Anarch.
That's enough time to buy another.
It is.
You can't get your Rover running, just buy one.
Wasn't that just the normal
and then fight with that one
things?
For 6 months?
Right.
Well, it'll take you 6 months to get up to speed and work out all the kinks. I have heard and seen people furiously working on their Rovers to get them ready for the events next year. I think you can join the club. I have been talking to the Vintage Grand Prix organizers, and we are expecting to have a dedicated area for all the trucks that are attending and a parade lap of the race course on Sunday. Registration will be necessary, and I will let you know more details as we know them.
Parade lap is on Sunday, not on Saturday.
Yes, it's going to be a parade lap, I think, on Sunday. That looks to be the day.
So then the race will be starting much later than normal.
Or they want to just get some of the racing over before the track is a slick track.
Well, let's hope. Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say this, the parade itself will take a while, but then there'll be all the cleaning of the oils off the track so that they can race.
And they have just announced that they are slightly changing the name. It's still going to be called the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, but they're now orienting themselves as a motorsport festival. So that's going to be a change, for 2023. I don't have any inside information. I'm just basing this off of what I read in the the email they sent out, but my guess is kind of running out of marks every year to have as the featured mark. So I think this is now to expand to motorsports in general, but still have that vintage aspect.
To me, I'm hearing festival, and I'm motorsports festival, and I'm thinking, well, it's going to be more than a race. They're going to have a sideshow with, I don't know, fire eaters and tire jugglers and who knows what else.
Well, they already do have a bunch of events throughout July that, they've been doing that for a number of years. The road rally, they have the 2 or 3 different car shows that take place throughout the Pittsburgh area. They have the historics races that go on up at the Pennsylvania Speedway. So I think that's probably where the festival moniker comes into play.
We should cross our fingers for like an off-road course or an RTV course.
Yes. Well, the Pennsylvania Motor Speedway, at one time, there was a little nascent off-road course they had there. So we did get to use that one once or twice.
It was 2 or 3 owners ago of that facility, though, if I remember correctly. Yeah, we'd be glad to build one in the current venue. Just they might have to sacrifice a couple holes of the golf course, but
Hey, we can use the sand traps, no problem.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I guess, or just let it rain and then
let it rain. I mean, at that point though, the Land Rovers are the only ones that can make it onto the site, and the rest have to sit down at the bottom and spin their wheels.
And also coming up in June is a NARC's Diamond Jubilee that takes place June 15th through the 18th of 2023 at the Greek Peak Mountain Resort in Cortland, New York. Registration is now open, and I know we have crossed over 300 registrants. That includes like drivers and their trucks and then and a passenger. So we rolled over 300 this past month. So if you're interested in coming, you now have 5 months, right? 5 months to get your Rover ready for that. And that will be, as I said, in June.
And for those who are family oriented, that's Father's Day weekend. So what better way to spend it than going up to the event?
All manner of Land Rovers are welcome to the Greek Peak, including Freelanders, right, Dixon?
NAS Freelanders are certainly welcome. We're looking forward to seeing how many appear.
We'd like to see one.
It'll be very interesting to see what John finds so attractive. That's, it's the true love of his life.
It's the cup holder in the dash.
No, it's how that thing opened up. You hit the button and it popped
It's
open.
the cup holder. It's the deploying of the cup holder, which is the biggest thrill in his life.
You really couldn't put anything in it because if you took a turn too sharp or you were off road, that thing was going to come tumbling out. So it was actually impractical. It just was interesting. That was it. It was very
pretty
impractical.
Much true of any cup holder, really.
All right, let's get to the news, shall we? Close on the heels of CEO Terry Bolloré leaving JLR, the car maker has confirmed that its director of global purchasing, Neil Marsons, is also leaving the company. No permanent replacement has been announced. On LinkedIn, Marsons said he is moving to a new role as Group Executive Director of Global Procurement and Supply Chain at construction equipment maker JCB, and he starts that in January of 2023. In a statement, JLR said, "We would like to thank Neil for his commitment to JLR over the past 10 years. His authentic leadership, style, and tireless efforts have been hugely appreciated, most recently in the supporting the business through the global semiconductor supply shortage. We wish him all the very best for the future."
I think he got tired of being on the front lines of the chip shortage.
It sounds like a cleaning of the house, I think is what this is called.
You think he's being pushed out? It kind of looked to me like he was leaving of his own accord because he got tired of dealing with it.
Maybe saw the writing on the wall. I mean, it could have been one of those situations where a couple months out, they kind of knew things weren't going well, and there was probably, internal discussions made. And I would be surprised if Bolloré was like one day, the next you're gone. It was probably several months where they're like, you got to turn this around or you got to do this. Probably some internal discussions over the past several months.
My read was that Marsons got tired of starting every day by saying, "Captain, we don't have any more dilithium crystals."
You may very well be right, Harold. I like your I like your idea better.
He's going to have a tough time answering the phone, though, moving from JLR to JCB. He's going to say that wrong every time.
Yeah, for a while, yeah. And he's going to go from making Chelsea tractors to making actual tractors.
Next up, JLR to hire 300 apprentices in 2023, expanding the pipeline for trainee engineers. JLR plans to employ approximately 300 apprentices in the UK next year. In addition, 400 graduates and 250 undergraduate places will be offered. Applications are to open in January. Roles are available across engineering, manufacturing, software engineering, data, logistics, and product development. All successful applicants will also be enrolled onto courses in autonomous driving, electrification, and more. The regime includes flagship apprentice degree apprenticeship programs, say that 3 times, in digital technology and engineering for students pursuing careers in software engineering, data engineering, analytics, or cybersecurity. Good luck to cybersecurity students in particular, being a cybersecurity professional myself. If JLR fulfills the initiative and provides more than 800 early career programs to new starters, this will be a 55% increase over 2022, a record intake for the automotive manufacturer. So I think it's a good thing.
I think it's great that the apprentice program still exists, and it's apparently doing well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aiming it towards the new things that they need, electrification and autonomous driving.
Right. Last time I saw a bunch of apprentices in one place, all ended up getting fired. That was subtle.
And next up, Land Rover Discovery support for 2022 in its crash testing for the Euro NCAP. So we talked about the Range Rover last month. This month, it's the Disco Sport. It seems to have done comparably well to the full-size Range Rover. So it's a 3.5-minute video if you want to see it getting hit and crashing and having a pole slammed into the side of it. Uncomfortable things.
Very, very unimpressive as these things go, though, because not much happens.
Yeah, lots of near mystery.
Which is the goal, I guess. The goal is to not actually harm anyone. So, yeah, just
exactly.
Takes the
and plenty of near misses.
Takes the fun out of the film, though.
Towards the end part is the safety assist, where they do the automatic braking, and you have dummies that come out of between cars, or they.
Remember, they're not dummies, they're apprentices.
Why they had such a sharp increase this year.
So that is the Disco Sport did pretty well. The safety assist, it did an 85% out of 100. The only thing is that they show none of the negatives on the safety assist. So you don't see it hit a dummy or clip a dummy.
Yeah, you don't see where those 15 points get deducted.
JLR joins the iCar Sustaining Partner Program. So this is the Inter-Industry Conference on Auto Collision Repair. iCar announced in December that JLR has joined the Sustaining Partner Program, designed to fund the various initiatives that drive iCar's vision that every person in the collision repair industry has the information, knowledge, and skills required to perform complete, safe, and quality repairs for the ultimate benefit of the consumer. The move builds on Jaguar Land Rover's long-standing training partnership with iCar, which provides customized training programs to JLR's authorized repair network facilities throughout North America. iCar Vice President of Sales and Marketing says that we thank JLR, all of our sustaining partners who are focused on the sustainability of every collision repair professional and business as we face a technical tsunami, which apparently is trademarked, talent shortage, and growing repair complexity. JLR's recent join to the Sustaining Partner Program is another step towards ensuring the future of quality collision repair. The Sustaining Partner Program provides tangible benefits to partners through access to information, course content, and marketing opportunities. So it seems like a good thing for North American, independent shops?
Yeah, it's going to help the independent, and the independent's kind of like fighting against a lot of things here because it's getting trickier to repair stuff. It's much more complicated than it used to be, not just because of the materials and just the way the cars are built, but now with all the electronic driving aids, the automatic driver assistance stuff, there's alignments that have to be done. And if you don't do those right, you have the potential for making the vehicle more dangerous than it was. If you get the alignments on the lane assist off, you could have a vehicle that veers out of the lane instead of stays in it. Read some articles where, it could be as simple as the fixtures that you use for the alignment. If you're not using proper ones that are endorsed by the manufacturer, and it's like this stuff's all optical. So if it's like the focus isn't quite right or the dots are just slightly off in size, you can drastically affect the outcome of the procedure. Something I really don't ever want to have to do, to be honest. It's just, I think there's there's so much complexity to it and so much liability involved that I feel for these guys they're doing this work.
It's one of those situations where it almost feels like it should be getting easier, that things should be plug and play. Truthfully, I mean, there's so much more complexity in how much wiring there is. And then, as Harold said, the requirements of everything being, physically perfectly aligned, as well as making sure that all the connections are there for the software. Yeah, it's a lot more.
And there's a calibration process involved too, where maybe it's perfectly in line, but you still, like doing a front end alignment on your suspension, you have this electronic alignment procedure with all of the sensors to be able to relate to each other and extrapolate the position from that, and that's a tricky procedure.
Yeah, strings and chalk is just not good enough anymore.
Nope. Nor 2x4s and tape measures.
Hopefully one of the things that Land Rover can bring to this is their experience with aluminum, structures and body panels and stuff, which are starting to come to North America from other brands.
And which are more complicated to repair properly.
Yes.
Definitely sounds like the manufacturers being involved should help, I would think, the independent.
Well, it's a shift in the tide, because in the past there's been a real kind of a rivalry between independents and dealers, because the manufacturer wanted to direct all this work to the dealers, but then there's pressure to support the independents, and it's interesting to see how much support the JLR is willing to give. And it's a good thing, because not everyone is going to go to a dealer. And so they're going to go to independents. So if we want to keep these things safe, we really need to support the independents with this stuff.
And also there's a lot of, at least here in the US, and I know this is true for Europe as well, a lot of legislation in the right to repair movement.
Right.
So obviously it's sort of better for them to get ahead of that if they can and already be involved, instead of suddenly, they're required to really help everyone else out in terms of access to documentation and
right.
parts and stuff like that.
And it's trade organizations like the ICAR that are driving that in all the different disciplines.
Probably also a matter of size, especially since Land Rover is not a large manufacturer and they don't have dealers in every city in North America. By helping out the independent garages, then they can have a repair location closer to their customers that may not necessarily all live in. Surprisingly, Western Pennsylvania has 3 Land Rover dealers, which to me is surprising, but you'll have whole states that don't have a dealer at all.
I think this also generates a lot of goodwill for the company, since there's not a big dealer network and they're not a big company, and they have this reputation of being expensive to fix and problematic. So if you make it easier for independents to do this stuff and to do it properly, it improves their image.
For the independents, older cars, you could use Bondo, you could do this, you could do that, you could do a whole bunch of things. But now you really are trapped by using OEM parts to go and fix things. Bumpers are supposed to be 5 or 10 mile an hour proof without damage. But now with all the sensors and the wiring and everything in these,
cameras.
The modern bumpers, cameras too, yes, that there's no way you're going to go to J.C. Whitney and buy a new bumper cover or anything else. You're going to have to buy the one from the manufacturer. You're going to have to get all the parts and fasteners probably from the dealership and so on. So your third party repair shops are going to be trapped on labor rates against the dealerships.
Well, it's not only that, but there's a lot of procedures that are very different, and they require different tools.
That's right.
It used to be pretty simple when you had sheet metal repair. You just you cut, you make a patch, and you grab your welder and you just weld it in place. Well, now you can't do that. It's a whole different procedure.
Until someone like California tries to do something to open things up, and there are going to be lawsuits all around that. Look what's going on right now between Massachusetts and Subaru, turning features off unless people pay for them. It's going to be a real tough time for the third parties. There should be a pool. When does Land Rover follow some of these other companies and start renting features like heated seats to the owners?
BMW did that as a test with the seats, but it was not here in North America. I don't think it was even in Europe.
Have you seen what happened with with Tesla. A chap sold a Tesla to a dealership, got it on traded, sold the thing. It was a Model S. It had every bell and whistle. The company that bought it from him or took it as a trade-in went and sold it to someone. And when that person went to use the self-driving features and some of those type of things, Tesla canceled it, saying the licenses for these things weren't transferable.
But they've said that from the get-go. That was always the case. You paid, although they have changed some things slightly over the years on that. You knew that from the get-go. If you wanted self-driving, you paid for the right to have it on the vehicle. So I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just saying that this is not like a retro thing they did.
No, this is just the thin edge of the wedge. Just as the rental of, and again, I go back to, I forget, it's about how the infotainment system works on Subarus in Massachusetts, that they're turned off if you buy a Subaru in Massachusetts because the state is requiring Subaru to do to open it up or do something with it. Subaru doesn't like, so they just turned it off. So if you want a fully kitted out Subaru, you buy it in Rhode Island or Connecticut or something.
Yeah, Massachusetts did pass a bunch of the right to repair laws sooner than some other states. So it might be related to that.
Yeah, and I think this is just Subaru's backlash to that.
Yeah. And the interesting thing with Tesla and a lot of those features are that they really are software only features. They don't require any additional hardware. They don't turn off any additional hardware really. Whereas like the BMW example, there was hardware that was there that you could not use.
Which then goes down the whole rabbit hole of John Deere versus the farmers, where what happens when someone goes and gets a, VAGCOM's version for whatever manufacturer and says, here, plug this in. Now you can turn on all these features because they are there.
And that is all the right to repair. That's all connected. Right. And yes, that's just connected to that. The subscription business, that's in the same ballpark, but it's slightly different.
However, I think Land Rover has already been doing that for decades, because quite often I feel like the subscription has just run out on my headlights.
Well, at least you have the assurance that you didn't pay your subscription rather than having Lucas and having it just go out randomly because you shouldn't be driving around at night.
I think Joseph Lucas was in charge of processing the subscription payments. I'm not sure about that.
All Freelanders, and I suspect this is probably the case with all Land Rovers now, all Freelanders came with heated seats. It's whether you paid to have the buttons installed and activated or not.
I think that was true of the D2s as well. If you had leather seats, you had heat, but unless you had certain packages, you didn't have the switches in the center, so you could just buy the switches and put them in there. The wires were there. You plug the switches in, you're good to go.
And honestly, a lot of the terrain response modes in Land Rovers, the more advanced ones, were similar, that you just had to plug in something else and that would work. But at least in those cases, you did actually have to buy something additional physical, have it wired in, because a lot of manufacturers do that. It's easier to have, some of the sensors there, but not put in all the wiring. But when it's like, oh, it's there, but we just literally have a switch that we turned off, but that normal people just can't flip that switch.
There's a couple issues there around if you live in the South and you only need heated, and maybe you drive north into the cold once a year, maybe have a subscription makes sense where you're like, oh, I'll pay $12 instead of paying, $300 or whatever it is for just to use it that one time. Then there's the repair side of it, of being able to repair things. And then does it come with it? I think Tesla doing the, you bought a subscription effectively to use self-driving, but if you sell the car, that doesn't get transferred. That's terrible.
For the same reason, I think warranties should always be transferable, and they're often not.
Well, especially when you move markets.
Right.
Look at all the gray market Nikon stuff and the warranty issues that surround that. But that's well known. If you buy gray market, that Nikon is not going to help you in the United States.
Right, yeah.
Go figure out that serial number.
If you're buying from a dealer in this country and you're buying especially a premium product from a dealer and you're given a long duration warranty, that's part of the market value of the vehicle. It should transfer.
Mm-hmm. I'm 100% in agreement.
All right, well, let's move on to the Discovery 6. We'll touch upon this later when we talk to Jeff Aronson. He talks a little bit about the upcoming Disco, but did find this article, and it's talking about the upcoming Discovery, that it'll be an EV, and it will rival the likes of the Volvo EC90, and it will focus on long distance touring and battery range. So JLR is said to be reinventing the Discovery as part of its rapidly growing electrification program. The reinvention of the SUV is to help separate it from the Defender, while also reestablish the Discovery nameplate in its lineup. The Discovery has been a significant model in the brand's lineup, but however, in the past few years, the popularity has been reduced, and currently it's the lowest selling model in Land Rover's lineup. The next generation Discovery is said to play a core part of the brand's upcoming product onslaught in the coming years. Land Rover will overhaul the range with a focus on electrification to give it a modern luxury brand image. Land Rover is also said to be working on establishing the Discovery name as a brand in its own right, with a range of offerings similar to Range Rover, and reports state that the smaller Discovery Sport model will also get an EV version sometime in 2024. The new electric version could be underpinned by the electric-based EMA platform, and the full-size Discovery could be part of the MLA architecture, which also underpins the new Range Rover and the Range Sport. The EV version of the new generation Disco, or the Discovery 6 as it should be, is expected to debut sometime in 2025 after the unveiling of its ICE-powered counterpart, and the Discovery 6 EV will rival the likes of the EC90 and will come with long-distance touring ability with a focus on battery range. So it sounds like maybe the Discovery has a new image or place. Maybe, I don't know if they pull this off.
I mean, it'd be more clear if it was going to be an electric only model, but the fact that they're going to have electric and internal combustion Discoveries, it just seems like it might be more of the same plus a little bit. Hard to say at this point. It's still too early.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And this discussions of just keeping the Discovery name out there, which I think overall was a good thing. But these are things we've heard in onesies and twosies in different ways. The Disco Sport, that they're going to move to electrification. They're going to be on this platform, that platform. At least it's being discussed. Whereas, it could easily have just been, the Disco could go away. And I think we would miss it. But where is it in the lineup? What hole is it filling? And it really, we don't know. I mean, clearly the Defender is taking sales away from the Discovery.
Well, it's because they're out discoing the Disco.
Well, and it's probably also chips too. Let's face it. They probably have not been advertising it because they don't have them to make, and they're going to focus all their sales because they've got that large backlog on the new spiffy models.
Even though that uses more chips than anything else. But yeah, they've got that big backlog they've got to work down. But you're right. I think having any discussion at all about the Disco is a good sign, because no discussion makes it go away quietly.
Yeah, and also for electric, the Disco makes more sense like aerodynamically and weight wise than the Defender does. And also, if they're shooting for having a slightly more affordable family targeted option EV vehicle, why not? That's sort of where they've been aiming for with that anyway.
Yeah, I'm just thinking conceptually, this Discovery sort of becomes your model family where you showcase your new stuff. The Defender is the tradition and the solid, and the Range Rover is the experience of being in a Range Rover, and the Discovery is where you blaze new trails. Technically, to me, I think that's the way it ought to be played. I mean, the name Discovery just sounds like that's like the one that's out front trying new stuff. I'm
with you on that.
And then there's the Freelander.
No, there is no Freelander. Freelander is gone. It's now a Disco Sport.
I know, but
well, hey, that's reality. That's where we are. That's reality. That's where we are. But it's still this all informs of what is the Disco doing? What's its purpose? What is it fulfilling? Is it? I think eventually it's going to fit that middle point between the practicality that generally is a Defender and the luxury that generally is the Range Rover, and you're probably going to have a premium off-road vehicle, and for the family, that's a question mark, that will be priced in between those two models.
That seems to be stepping on a lot of toes going both ways in terms of where the this particular mark actually fits in their hierarchy is just going to lead to confusion. You would think that, as Harold, you implied, if Discovery is going to be the brand that's going to go and lead in terms of technology and electric first and all the rest of that stuff, that tends to make sense, because otherwise some of their offerings right now, they're cannibalizing themselves in terms of market.
Right. I mean, the Disco has been getting squeezed out gradually. It was okay when there was no Defender, because you bought the Disco because you couldn't get a Defender. But now that you can, what is there for the Disco? So if you give it something that it can be its own identity somehow.
Yeah, and the Discovery name, like you said, certainly, I hate to use this word, but evokes that impression.
Yeah.
But the reality is that Land Rover puts that sort of technical exploration into the Range Rover mark. So yeah, it still does tend to leave the Discovery out. Well, traditionally, it was
technically, I think they put a lot of the new electronic technology in the Defender first, but that they shouldn't have. But
I think some of that they did do in like the Velar.
Yeah,
before it actually made it to the Defender.
It just seems like the Defender has so many bells and whistles that it's kind of like they're trying to make that the technology flagship now, which doesn't make sense to me.
Well, sadly, it seems like every car has that many bells and whistles these days.
Yeah, well, yeah. This is why I don't like new cars.
Well, that still brings us back around to what's going to happen to the Disco, and hopefully, it finds a place, because I'm glad they're talking about it. But at the same time, where's it going to end up?
I'd hate to see it end up next to the Freelander in the corporate parts bin.
Yeah,
there's too much marketing into it for that to happen. The issue is going to be more what Jerry and his design ideas do to all of this stuff to try and keep these things actually separate from each other so they don't look alike. If you can achieve that, then there's something there.
Jerry has like almost no history in doing that. However, his forte has been making things look alike.
Yes.
And not have their own identities. So let's see if he's able to do anything else.
Well, I hope he does.
Maybe they'll just take the Range Rover, take a little bit of the Defender, put them together, and then give us a proper roofline increase halfway back of about at least an inch or two, and boom, call it, and then you'll call it a Disco.
That's a lot of it. I mean, that and the stadium seating and that stepped roofline. I think they should go even further with the stepped roofline and put the little windows in it like the Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser.
Oh, those are cool. But yeah,
I know exactly. Yeah. And that would really make the Disco over the top.
Well, what if you made the whole roof a pane of glass? And even with the curves and the bumped up step line, you could call it transparent aluminum.
Yeah, that sounds really expensive.
It does.
We're getting a little off the rails here.
But it's good to be heard that Disco was still being discussed, because it hasn't had a place in a while. I would also throw out that maybe there's one good thing to the chip shortage causing some conservation of their models. It has gives them more time to think about where the Disco will fit and what to do with it. Because if they had full chips available to them, it might be more difficult.
Yeah, perhaps.
All right, let's move on to the 2022 Land Rover Range Rover wins the Motor1.com Star Award. Perhaps more than any other segment, luxury cars take a wide, diverse variety of forms. Of course, there are still traditional sedans like the 2021 Motor One Star Award winning Mercedes-Benz S-Class, but the field also includes EVs, sporty crossovers, compact hatchbacks, and a healthy number of SUVs. But in spite of the diverse crowd that contend for the 2022 Star Award for Best Luxury Vehicle, our decision wasn't particularly challenging. After a week full of testing, the Land Rover Range Rover set itself apart with a consistently enjoyable and comfortable driving experience in a variety of situations. But before we could decisively name a winner, we had to suss out the praise and pain that each particular vehicle in our test brought with it, with a few surprises along the way. I'll let you, dear listener, read about the Acura, the BMW iX xDrive 50, the Genesis G90, the Genesis GV70 3.5T, the Infiniti QX60, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, the Lucid Air Grand Touring, and I will read you a little bit about the Land Rover Range Rover. The Range Rover took its win on merit on the comfortable cosseting driving experience it offers. The ride is smooth and composed over all kinds of pavement, and the Range Rover even acquits itself okay on a curvy road. No one claimed the long wheelbase SUV would be sporty. We tested the base powertrain, a turbocharged 3-liter inline 6 with 395 horsepower, 406 pound-feet of torque, and we find it to be better companion to the smooth, graceful Range Rover than the optional but peakier and less smooth twin-turbocharged V8. Save your money because the base engine is the one to get. The Range Rover drew some divisive opinions on its styling. The front end does feel rather monolithic and featureless, while the unusual taillight treatment and side vent motifs look a bit gaudy for gaudiness' sake, but a strong shoulder line and large greenhouse tie the new Rangy in with its predecessors, and a gorgeous warm gray metallic paint coordinated perfectly with its caraway light brown interior color. Add on those optional 23-inch wheels for maximum posing. I added the emphasis on 23 inches. The Range Rover was, as tested price, was $130,000.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Achieves a maximum speed of 150 miles an hour. 18 city, 26 highway, 21 combined. 5,600 pounds, 7-person seating capacity, 8-speed automatic. 0 to 60. Your 2022 Land Rover, Range Rover, achieves 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds.
That's actually fairly slow for your high-end vehicles these days.
These days, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the Dodge Viper or something, they were like touting 6 seconds or something way back in the day when it was...
In 1991, that was quick.
Yeah.
Now you can get a Hyundai that'll do that.
Yeah. It's amazing what electrification will do.
Well, and also just modern mechanics and modern technology in general. The fact that you can hurdle that nearly 6,000 pound vehicle with a monolithic front end in under 6 seconds, still astounding.
Oh, yeah.
It takes 6 seconds for me to close the door on my Defender properly.
It takes you 6 seconds to find the key.
Yes. Legacy ownership. I guess it's wonderful.
Probably takes 6 seconds for a lot of people to find the gear when shifting a Defender or a series vehicle.
Here's a new one for you. Sometimes it takes me 6 hours to remember that I left the key in the ignition after I get into the house. I'm like, oh, where's the key? Oh, it's still in the ignition. It'll be fine.
Well, spoken like a Land Rover owner. I don't take the keys out because then I'll lose them. Our good friend Mark, who takes his truck downtown and just leaves the keys in the ignition wherever he goes. Some of the trucks he builds don't even have an ignition key. They just have a toggle switch.
You just have to know which one is the correct
well, you
one.
You got to know where the switch is. I mean, he's at least a little bit stealth about it.
Yeah, he does have a little bit of operational security by hiding the toggle switch.
Is that security by obscurity?
Yes, that would be security by obscurity. Yes. In some ways, that might even be multi-layered security because he hides the switch and people are expecting there to be a key and they can't find one. So there's an additional layer of security, another layer of obscurity.
And of course, the big layer is all the sticks coming out of the floor and the steering wheel being on the correct side. There's another layer.
All right, let's move on to Carwow had a nifty video. It is entitled, Can a Range Rover Beat a Defender Off-Road? And they take a brand new Defender and a brand new Range Rover and they compare them across the same course with some off camber, over some mud and ruts, and hill climb both up and down. It's a 17-minute video. If you like both vehicles, I think you'll enjoy the video. The Carwow typically does a nice job. I think maybe not surprised that it was a tie. Now, there is a element of the driver involved, and they both made some mistakes at different times, so that's why it ends up really being a tie, but it's really the same underpinnings.
Yeah, it's virtually the same vehicle, just different skin. I think the only real difference would be the driver and the tires, perhaps.
And the knob, what position the knob's in.
Now, generally, the Range Rover is lighter. It has 4 millimeters of ground clearance over the Defender, and powering the Range Rover, it is a twin turbocharged 4.4 liter V8 producing 530 horsepower, 538 pound-feet of torque. The Defender has the larger supercharged 5 liter V8 and it pumps out 525 horsepower, 460 pound-feet of torque. And the Defender is heavier than the Range Rover, tipping the scales at 57.38 pounds and 55.33 pounds for the Rangy. So that's like 200 pounds different. And as I said, the Rangy has a slightly better ground clearance, but the Defender has better approach and departure angles. Shocker, ends up being a wash at the end of the day.
I'm still trying to process the fact that a Defender can weigh more than a Range Rover.
That's where we are.
Wow.
And next is a road trip by Top Gear. They took a Land Rover Defender, a 90 in particular, with the world's most extreme Caravan. So, Top Gear doesn't have a good relationship with Caravans, as you're probably well aware, but they took this Caravan, which is a dual axle Caravan, and took it out in a D90.
Pretty sure they've deliberately tried to not have a good relationship with Caravans.
That's true. That's true. That's a good point. This is about a 15-minute video where they drive to the northernmost parts, or try to anyway, of the UK on the is it the equinox, summer equinox, the longest daylight of the year?
That would be the solstice.
Solstice.
Thank you, solstice. Almost exactly 6 months ago. Now that I think of it. So if you want to check that, if you're interested in buying a 90 and maybe towing, or a 110 and towing, you might want to check that out and see what it can do, because it
is a pretty big looking trailer behind this 90.
That and it's massive. It has onboard water. I forget how much it could hold, but it was enough for like a weekend, they say, to cook and wash. It has that has a washing machine in it. That Caravan, that trailer has a washing machine in it.
A little over the top.
Yes. The rear shell opens up to show you the door. That's where the washing machine is, right next to the door. It's not a large one, but it is a washing machine.
Most people just use a 5-gallon pail with a lid on it. That's their washing machine.
Yeah, and then as you bounce around the trail, it does the agitation.
Right. Well, I guess the new 90 has too smooth of a ride for that to work properly.
The 90 did have a couple technical faults. They talk about one where I guess it went into some sort of limp mode, and here's a shocker. You turn it on, turn it off, cleared that.
Kind of surprised they haven't come up with 3 buttons on the dash: the control, the alt, and the delete. Give it the old 3-finger salute.
Well, it's now it's just basically a power button. Do the restart. So if you're interested, that's it's worth checking out. The one thing I did notice that they talk about is that they think that since it was a 90, there was a little more of the play between the trailer and the vehicle, especially going over bumps, a little more of the, that rolling bumpiness that you get. And they think that with the 110, it might, since it was longer compared to the longer trailer, it would have smoothed out that ride. But it didn't seem like uncontrolled, but it was at least something that you could see occur going over a bump.
The one thing I noticed is I don't think I've ever seen a 90 with the pollen sacks on the side.
Yeah.
I've always seen them on the 110s. I've never seen them on the 90s.
And then there's a Land Rover Defender Transcontinental Expedition. This is another video of the Kingsley Holgate Foundation. They drove Defender 110s from South Africa all the way up into Europe. And while this video doesn't give you all the details, it just discusses, it's a 3-minute video, and discussing that they did it, and a little bit about the adventure. So we'll have to look for more info on that Transcontinental expedition that they did.
In modern Defenders.
Yes, thank you. Modern Defenders, all well kitted out.
Because doing them in a legacy Defender would be too easy. Everybody's done that already.
I think that foundation rings a bell. I believe they traveled through Nepal a couple years ago in Heritage Defenders. And next up is Alex Bescoby, who took the last Overland. He was featured in National Geographic magazine, talking a little bit about the journey. There's really nothing new for me to share with you about the journey from this article, but if you want to learn a little more about Alex, therell be a link, of course, in the show notes. You can check that out.
One would expect the pictures to be good.
Yeah, it's true. There were only a couple. There was the one him on the bonnet, on the wing, excuse me, and that was it. Him looking out. Very, very low Rover content.
They did take most of the photos themselves.
That's not a National Geo sport. They don't like taking outside pictures. So.
All right.
And next, what to look out for when buying an old Land Rover Defender. So if you're in the market, now's a good time to check out this article. This was published in early December of the things to look out for. What is the number one thing to look out for, Harold?
Rust.
It says the most important thing to look out for when buying a Defender is rust. And there's some other things too. Rough usage.
Deferred maintenance is one of my big things. Rust and deferred maintenance are the two things that I look for.
Which is an excellent article to look at if you're in the market for an old Defender, because we have an old Defender up on auction. This is a highly modified D90 that was owned by Jenson Button. It's up for auction. He's a stellar Formula One driver, and he was crowned a world champion in 2019. And this is a heavily modified D90. It features a slew of modifications. Notable upgrades include a V8 powertrain uprated suspension, and revised interior. It received an LS3 V8. That is the 6.2 liter Corvette LS V8 crate engine in 2015. It has other improvements around the same time, most of them performed by Urban Automotive, self-described as bespoke modifiers of luxury automotive brands. The highly modified Defender is up for auction on Collecting Cars and is offered with 4,085 miles on the clock, which seems to be the mileage registered when they did the engine swap.
Didn't drive it much. I guess it, even with the Corvette engine, it still wasn't fast enough for him.
Yeah, I think
when you make your living driving Formula One, there's no way a Land Rover is ever going to feel fast enough.
It'll never be fast enough. It has slightly more body roll than an F1 race car.
Slightly,
and slightly less grip.
Yes.
I like the wheels on it. I thought I do like those. Oh, interesting. The plate here is a Montana plate.
Well, yeah, that's how you get around the laws in this country. You register in the Wild West where nobody cares.
And then another historic vehicle is up for auction. This is Queen Elizabeth's Series 1. This is listed by Silverstone Auctions, and it's a Series 1. It was the 11th to be built in 1953. Queen Elizabeth took delivery about a year after she succeeded her father, King George VI. And according to the listing, the Land Rover was commissioned by the royal family and delivered to Balmoral Castle in Scotland when it was registered as NXN1 in 1954.
That would have been her first Land Rover, I guess. First as Queen, definitely, and perhaps the first one at Balmoral. And then she had a whole slew of them up there.
No, I think her father had Land Rovers before she did.
Oh yeah, she did have.
I don't know if they were at Balmoral, though. That's a good question, Harold. Don't know.
Yeah, he had one, definitely. He was given one of the first productions, but this perhaps began her obsession.
And most of the time, this reportedly was spent on the grounds of Balmoral, driven by the Queen and Prince Philip. And Prince Charles also had time behind the wheel. The Queen Mother reportedly drove the Land Rover at the nearby Birkenhall estate before the off-roader was sold to its most recent owner in 1966. It was re-registered as LXC 894D. There are conflicting reports about the history of the Land Rover between 1966 until now, with Silverstone Classics claiming it has resided with its current owner at Ballater, Scotland, since it was purchased from the royal family. According to social media posts in the UK's owner groups, the Land Rover Series 1 Owners Club, the Land Rover was featured in a 2015 episode of Antiques Roadshow, although it was fitted with the original NXN plate, not the LXC plate. And the listing includes photos of the Land Rover at the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in February of 2022, one of more than 26 cars from JLR displayed to celebrate the 70 years as Elizabeth's being head of state. Silverstone Auction estimates that the Royal Family Series 1 could sell for between £100,000 to £150,000. Bidding is scheduled to begin on the February 25th, 2023.
I wonder if that's what Charles learned to drive in.
Not a clue.
Maybe what he learned to drive off-road in. I can think of no better vehicle in which to learn to drive than an old Land Rover.
Especially a manual. Be very difficult. It's not going to stall on you at 799 RPM.
Or the computer is not going to turn off the engine at 799 RPM.
Yeah, although the generator might decide it doesn't want to generate enough.
Well, the generator doesn't generate enough at redline. So,
well, good point. It's working as designed then. There was another article I had about this in the inter-years when it was lost. Almost seemed like the fate of Oxford, of the first Overland fame, where it was sitting in a barn full of bits and bobs and dross and not looking well. So I'm glad it was rescued and restored.
This has a capstan winch on the front of it.
Yeah.
Which is a cool piece of kit, but I mean, I'm just now picturing Her Majesty down by the creek, up front with the rope wrapped around it and the big gloves on. She's pulling a tree out of the river. I can just picture it.
Is that a brass handle or is
that's a brass knob there?
A brass knob. There we go.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in owning a piece of history, you can do that to purchase Queen Elizabeth's original Series 1.
If I had the money, I'd do it just for the provenance of it.
And finally, British Motor Museum to hold 38 motoring shows in 2023. And of course, the one that's most relevant to us will be Land Rover. So the British Motor Museum has announced its most ambitious schedule for 2023, featuring 38 motoring shows, including several new events. With the popularity and demand at an all-time high, this is the museum's busiest schedule to date. The award-winning museum in Gaydon is also freezing ticket prices at 2022 rates for visitors. Events marking a special anniversary take center stage, and tickets for these are available now. First is the Gaydon Land Rover Show, May 7th through the 8th, which will celebrate Land Rover's 75th anniversary. And a special one-off show to mark MG Centenary will take place on May 27th.
And in between the two is the Vaux All, one of my favorite event names.
I think we know where Land Rover will not be celebrating World Land Rover Day, otherwise known as the Land Rover's birthday on April 30th, because the Ultimate BMW Show will be back on April 30th after a bumper first year, which featured over 850 cars. So that's going to take place at the British Motor Museum in Gaydon, this BMW show on April 30th, which is Land Rover's birthday. So we know where Land Rover will not be celebrating.
Well, I know where they should. They should do it in Amsterdam.
They should.
Agreed.
Well, that's the news for December 2022. Knightsbridge Overland seat covers help protect your classic Land Rover. Whether you're on the trail or cruising around town, they're the perfect solution for protecting your pristine Land Rover seats or to cover up your well-worn and aged seats. Each seat cover is hand-cut and sewn in the USA for a custom fit that looks like it's straight from the factory. Every seat cover is crafted using durable 600 denier Cordura material. It's waterproof, oil, and dust-resistant. Knightsbridge Overland seat covers are designed to be extremely comfortable and help keep you warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer while providing protection against mud, dirt, grime, and more. Knightsbridge Overland seat covers are available for most classic Land Rovers, including Series, Defender, Discovery, and Range Rover. Select the Knightsbridge Overland seat cover that's right for your Rover. Available in both tactical and non-tactical versions in 4 colors, black, tan, mocha, and gray. Our tactical seat covers include military-grade MOLLE webbing that accommodates pouches, weapons, tools, first aid kits, and more. Non-tactical seat cover feature 3 handy pockets for much-needed extra storage in your Land Rover. Visit knightsbridgeoverland.com and enter Steer 10 at checkout for 10% off your Knightsbridge Overland seat cover order. That's knightsbridgeoverland.com. Enter Steer 10 for 10% off your order. Protect and enhance your Land Rover seats with Knightsbridge Overland. Making his triumphant return to the podcast, annual visit from Jeff Aronson, editor of Rovers Magazine. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much, John. Hello, Harold.
Hey, Jeff.
How you been? Everything doing all right? You're still in Maine.
I am still on this island off the coast of Maine, as are my 3 Land Rovers.
It was just a 3-hour tour, but you've been on that island for years.
Well, Gilligan and I can't find the way off.
Just to refresh for those who don't know, what are your 3 Land Rovers?
So I am the happy owner of a Series 2A 88-inch station wagon, currently running a soft top. I've had that one for 31 years, lovingly the QE1. I have a 67 109 that I purchased about 5 years ago now.
That's the new one.
Yes, that's the new one from Virginia. And its name is that of the original family owner. So it is named Rickman. And it was one of the founding vehicles at the very first Rover Owners of Richmond rally, the predecessor for the Mid-Atlantic Rally. I'm very happy. That is a Series 2A 109 station wagon. Great delight. And my third one is Gilroy, a 97 Discovery 1 SE7, named for the director of Land Rover, Tony Gilroy, who saw the Discovery from start to its first production. And those in the UK who study the company carefully state that the Discovery and its creation actually helped save the finances of Land Rover. So those are my three. All three are running at the moment. Two of them have Christmas.
Whoa, that's a feat right there. We should. Yeah. We need to take a moment to say all three are running and
we need a little fanfare for that one, or a moment of silence or something.
I'm doing my best Wayne's World. I'm not worthy. This is not without some cost in terms of brake work on the Discovery, replacing rusty pipes, and an extraordinarily expensive set of all new tires for the QE1.
Tires are, they are.
Tires are expensive. Ooh.
Well, I'm sorry, what year's the Disco one?
97.
97, you did say that. Yeah, okay.
And all 4 oxygen sensors are working properly at this very moment.
I'm assuming that check engine light is just on to congratulate me, having checked the engine.
You still have one. It's there.
Yeah, I checked. It's there.
So, no, there is one that clearly needs to be replaced. That just popped on.
I was going to say, you couldn't possibly have the unicorn.
So to go back, I bought that one now some 6 years ago in the city of Frederick, Maryland, and drove it home. I bought it having put a new starter in it and a new fuel pump. And she fired right up. And I no sooner left the service station where the work had been done by the previous owner than the check engine light went on for the first time.
I'm impressed you got off the lot.
You were nowhere near as impressed as the the service station owner, who couldn't wait for it to leave the lot.
So he took the tape off the dash.
The black tape over the
No, he just tried to say it's nothing. So
it's nothing.
But I drove it, 1,000 miles home. So, and it's been great ever since. It's a very handy, both working vehicle and long travel vehicle. It's a good one.
Yeah, I think that check engine light is proof that the myth about British electrics is bunk, because that's dead reliable on mine. It's always lit.
They are brilliant that way. To go to the British Electric and to admit this, I now have found that when I dash out at night, and some of your listeners, and John, and Harold, you may remember, I'm a volunteer EMT for this island's rescue service.
It's one of your many hats.
Thank you. On occasion, I've jumped out of the house, walked quickly over to the disco to get her fired up, starts right up. It's always wonderful about that. But when I turn the light switch on, well, all I see is the dashboard illuminated, the high beam indicator on, whether I'm in high beams or no, and very, very little headlight. So on a couple of occasions, I've had to jump out of it, turn it off, jump into one of the series trucks in order to get to the ambulance bay. I can't tell you why it's happening. I can also just say it's sporadic. It doesn't really matter what the weather is. There's no particular logic to me as to what's going on. To avert the problem completely, I took the Land Rover enthusiast trick of buying a control arm for the stock that goes on the steering column. Now that I have a new one and have threatened the vehicle with putting it on, it has been flawless.
Yep, that works.
For any of our listeners who are new to Rover ownership, if you're owning a brand new Land Rover, hopefully these things don't apply to you. But this is what happens when you own an older one.
Wait about 10 years.
25 years old is mine. Yeah.
This is what happens though. It's fine one day, next day it's not, and then a day after that it's fine again. Can't figure it out. Don't know.
And this is why you have a bunch of them. That way you sort of play the lottery, and which one starts, that's the one you drive that day.
Well, it got so bad during one little spell that I actually had to jump into my Triumph Spitfire to actually go to an ambulance call, an emergency call.
Well, you get there quickly that way.
There's no better definition than an emergency than actually counting on a Triumph Spitfire.
Well, it could be worse. You could be relying on an MG.
And this is why we wanted to celebrate and take a moment, the fact that you had all three Rovers functioning at the same time.
and the Triumph, apparently.
And the Triumph.
Both Triumphs are running great. Yep.
So you have 3 Rovers, 2 Triumphs, and do you still have the Corvair?
Sadly, I sold the Corvair
to finance the Triumphs and the Rover parts.
Basically, the parts for all the other cars. Yep.
Yeah.
I just decided that was a delightful trip into American engineering, and I would take another Corvair in a heartbeat because I think they're wonderful automobiles. However, I felt guilty, and I've always been an Anglophile. I've almost always had only British cars. One quick diversion to an Italian car, and that's been it. So I'm happy to be all British.
Yeah, one Italian car is usually enough to cure you of that curiosity.
It was fine when it was there, but I moved back onto British cars after that. Yeah.
So it's been a year since we last talked with you. We seem to have this tradition now where you come on and give us the state of Land Roverdom. Where does Land Rover sit after another year? It's now the end of 2022.
So there are, to me, if you will, 2 sides of that question. One is, where is the Land Rover enthusiast community after this year? And then the other is, where is Land Rover corporate after this year? So if we look first and just quickly, because I know you've covered them in other podcasts, once the worst of the pandemic was over, even during, but particularly once it was over, Land Rover Club or Land Rover social group events succeeded wildly. The numbers of attendees have just been fantastic.
Everybody was a bit pent up.
Most likely, Harold, but boy, there could have been other ways that you would have taken that pent up enthusiasm for anything. You might have even shifted away from your Land Rover activities to travel outside of a Land Rover.
Heaven forbid.
Not my idea, but it happens, I'm told.
I mean, the pandemic's bad enough. Why make things worse by doing that?
But I was delighted and amazed at the turnout to pre-pandemic levels or above at events nationwide. New events coming up. Happily, enthusiasts have sent stories about them to Rovers Magazine. We've just been delighted to run them from all over the country. Events like the Pacific Northwest Challenge will be back in our winter issue. That one, if you will, revived to terrific numbers after the pandemic. The California clubs, both the SoCal and the NorCal club, have both become quite active, and they are showing up at events in other locations. The Solar Hull Society's national rally in Colorado, despite rather abysmal weather, turned out to have good numbers, and people had a terrific time, had wonderful responses to it. And I'm very excited about that, because it really says that despite the opportunity to do things that you were barred from, like international travel or something like that, it's clearly succeeded in terms of its numbers, but it hasn't cut into Land Rover events. If anything, they've grown in number by that. So I think this is a great launch for 2023 for those events.
This year was the first time, I think, in my memory, I've seen Mar as a sellout.
Yes, and
quickly too.
And very quickly. You're right, John, and you're right, Harold. The Mid-Atlantic Rally went back to the site of some previous decade, or 12 years ago, I believe. This now called the Little George Farm, Pearls Pond Little George Farm. With the new owners of that property, it was agreed that at first there should be no more than 125 vehicles at the event, so that it would prove to be manageable to the new ownership. Well, it quickly, I believe in 2 or 2.5 days, it was sold out. They then agreed, okay, it could go to 150, and that went. And they finally agreed to one more jump to 175. And it was gone. I mean, this was not something you could linger and decide, am I going a month or two prior? It was full up, and they couldn't take any more.
Yeah, I remember going to Mar, and it's like, okay, if the truck starts, I'll go to Mar.
Yep. And in previous locations and or this location in the previous ownership, numbers were less of a concern. The delightful part was that the new owners of the property, who run a kind of a hunt club there for bird shooting and bird hunting, they run Defenders as they got 4 of them, 4 ex-military ones that they use to transport people around the acreage, up the hills, through the fields, and so on. So
like
they're
a bird safari.
There you are. Only I believe you take a bird home with you, or birds up to some limit. But they're also very much about conservation. They actually want to encourage people to raise the kind of crop and leave the land such that it encourages the growth of ground-based birding.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing at all. It's very impressive. But they were thrilled at having the event, despite the fact that it was the old hurricane-style weather throughout the weekend.
There was that.
It was a proper mar.
It was a proper mar, exactly, mud and rain. And yet it didn't, I'm going to do this pun. You ready? Dampen anyone's enthusiasm.
Oh, ouch.
You can excise that out, John.
I'm purposely leaving it in.
John will probably fanfare that and use it as an Easter egg later.
That's good.
And the owners actually spoke to the entire assembly one night over dinner, and they were thrilled at what happened. They've already welcomed them back. And I think, to the kudos of the Rover owners of Virginia, they demonstrated that they could run a very entertaining event in a large geographic area and keep it a responsible entertaining event, so that the owners of the property felt comfortable having it back. And it looks like that's going to be the long-term home for one.
And that's one of the reasons to limit attendance too, is so you can manage that and keep everybody safe and happy.
Exactly. And that's just one example. It's a good one, Harold, but it's just one example of the successes of events this year. At the corporate side, the interesting part to me has been a genuine change in conversations that I've had with Land Rover senior management about the role of the enthusiast in Land Rover's daily activities as well as its corporate history. And I cite that because of their fascinating set of corporate activities to encourage the dealers to understand what Land Rovers can really do through the Trek competition, to create what we know are really just sort of decaled Defenders, the so-called Defender Trophy, the 110 or the 90. But what they've really done is to say, all right, what can they do? How can you compete as an owner in them? And then, of course, at the dealer level, the Trek competition that our friends at Lucky 8 outfitted a group of Defender 110s and 90s, I believe, as well, 90s. And actually, there were nearly 100 dealerships that bought one of these and sent 3 of their employees to compete at the different events. I mean, this is an extraordinary change. Trek goes back just to 2019, and then they stopped it during the pandemic. Was a revival of something that had happened right around 2008-9, before the recession and all. That's when the last of the major dealer competitions. And here they are just saying, hey, we really want our employees to know what these things are.
Yeah, that's a change.
The Destination Defender event too would seem to happen.
I was just about to launch into that, John. You're absolutely right. Now, this is an interesting build, and this is where I think the enthusiast community really demonstrated to Land Rover Corporate that it has a genuine value to the brand, not just an entertaining value, but a genuine value. Destination Defender grew from last year's Defender Service Awards. So nonprofits throughout the country and Canada were invited by Land Rover to apply for the use of, or the actual gift of, a Defender 110 and a Defender 90, depending on which year. The voting was not done by Land Rover. The voting was actually done online by advocates and adherents of those various nonprofits. There were 5 different broad categories, from environment to rescue to veterans needs, 5 total. And each had some 800 total applications, according to Land Rover.
And by the way, that application was a video. So that it's not just writing things down. Like, you had to put some production value into that submission.
Yeah, although, and let me finish with that thought in a sec, John, because it was really remarkable in many ways. Who won and why? In each category, Land Rover urged people online to vote for the one you think should win in each category. In Maine, we actually found a foundation called the Travis Mills Foundation, a veteran for disabled veterans here in Maine, was actually one of the finalists. So most of the Down East Land Rover Club sent in votes for them. They didn't win the final, but that being said, the people who did were by and large the smallest organizations that you could imagine. In Wisconsin, there's a group that is working on reviving a lake somewhere west of Milwaukee, Green Lake it's called. And that group is essentially a group of volunteers with one part-time executive director. They do research into the lake conditions and so on. Their video, John, was very simple in its production, and then very moving, obviously, to its adherents. And the chances that they could have purchased a Defender 110 for their use were negligible. They don't have that kind of budget.
And to clarify, they did get 130s this year. That was
Thank you. Thank you. I was just about to say, I believe it was a 130 this year. It was a 110 last year. These awards, there were 500 or so people in attendance at Destination Defender. What was that? Destination Defender was the opportunity to publicly announce who won the awards. It was also a chance to showcase every new Defender model at an equestrian farm in upstate New York. And various clubs, organizations, and Rovers magazine were asked, how do we spread the word? We'd like to get heritage Land Rovers there. What started with about 20 quickly became 100 plus. In a miserable day of travel that it would have been if you had driven there on the day you were supposed to be there. Now, lots of new Defenders. So there were about 400 vehicles total in and out of that location. And easily 100 of them were, and these are just Defenders. So you were urged to bring a Defender. A couple of Range Rover Classics snuck in, but they were not specifically invited, nor were Discoveries.
the riffraff.
I think there was an FC 101 too.
Yes, Chris Filardi came from Connecticut in his.
Those deserve a pass no matter what.
Right, and I had actually, as the magazine behind the scenes, we were asked if it would be possible to help spread the word, and what kind of enthusiasts do we know who would add to the event, add positively to the event, and that was an easy one to do. People drove from considerable distances as well as local to that major New York metropolitan market. From Virginia, I know from Ohio, obviously from New England, a few of them from Pennsylvania. I mean, you saw quite a variety of license plates there. They were, in effect, mingling the new Defender owner who loves the brand, but they might be new to the brand. The Defender has been remarkably successful in bringing people who hadn't thought of getting a Land Rover to move from another vehicle to it. It doesn't seem, for example, like the Ford Bronco has hurt anything that way.
So the Destination Defender event they had, that's when they announced those awards. Was there off-roading, and did they have old and new compete against each other?
This was a problem. There was an off-road course created by the Land Rover driving team folks who had come in about a week before and created a perfect demonstration course. And you indeed were supposed to be able to take either rides in new 110s or 90s. They didn't have the 130s on the course because it was too compact. The turns would have been too much. The weight would have been too much. And they literally created hills where there were no hills and streams where there were no streams. So they worked for a good week steady on getting that ready. Then came an absolute monsoon, 2 days of a total monsoon just prior, and everything got really soft. By the end of the Saturday of the event, when you were supposed to be able to take your personal vehicle on the off-road course, it was simply too dangerous. And the determination was made that we really have to close that. In fact, even some of the folks who were taking rides in the Trophy 110, that was the Trophy 110s that are there, or the 90s, the new 90s were there, even they had to stop giving those rides. Things were just dissolving underneath their wheels.
All that work they did basically washed away.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is when you build a course like that, the ground hasn't had a time to really congeal, if you will, and firm up. So it's soft. It washes away really quickly.
It does, Harold. You're absolutely right. Now, the fun part was when the time arrived, it was sometime later in the afternoon, maybe 3 o'clock or so, that you were supposed to be able to take your Defender, your Heritage Defender, on the course. The Land Rover execs there, the driving team people, of course, have to focus on individual safety. So when they closed the course, it wasn't because they didn't think you could make it. They just didn't want you tipping over on the side of a hill as it just landslided away from you. The disappointment on the heritage enthusiasts who really wanted to get stuck,
right.
who really wanted to
those who don't mind a little body damage too, perhaps.
Come on, I want to try it. I'll do the insurance waiver. Come on.
Well, and the problem there is that most people would be fine, but there's always that one idiot that's going to get hurt. So to protect him, you've got nobody on there.
Yeah, but there was genuine disappointment, and it was interesting. I'm sure even some of the new Defender owners were baffled that, what do you mean it can't go through it?
Right.
The water literally was bonnet deep.
Oh, wow.
Stream, and it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed, the lawyers say, 38 inches or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Right. Yeah, that's the official waiting depth.
Way more than that.
Well, and that's the one downside to it being a corporate event is that it's going to be very driven by the legal department as opposed to an enthusiast event where, we have insurance, we don't care, let's just do it.
But it was a huge success visually. There were lots of families there. The mingling of the vehicle, regardless of generation or model, really said that there were hundreds and hundreds of enthusiasts who wanted to be together and celebrate the Defender. The vibe was fantastic. Jim Macri from the High Meadow Farm collection brought his were transported by Land Rover to the event, where he had a tent of his own so that people who didn't know the heritage vehicles very well could actually see all the series vehicles.
Did he bring his Centresteer?
You betcha he brought his Centresteer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. That effort on Land Rover's part to bring people who they hadn't really talked to at the Defender end of the world was quite remarkable. And the executives that I met really beamed at the success of the event.
Did you get a sense if any of the new owners or vice versa, the old owners were converted to the other?
There's no question from my readership anyway, that plenty of readers who get Rovers magazine because they're heritage owners also have a new one of any of the models. It's pretty common. That's why the off-road would have been neat, so that people who don't know could see what a heritage vehicle could do. Now, at the end of the day, as you guys know, one of the worst surfaces for any Land Rover, for any vehicle whatsoever, is slippery grass that's growing on clay. And this is upstate New York. So those flat fields that were soggy and soaking wet, these equestrian fields, were being stripped away every time somebody tried to move. And there were times when it was a heavily tractioned tire on a D90, a heritage D90, that gave a yank to a new Land Rover, simply because the software and the tires, of course, that come with them, just couldn't deal with no traction whatsoever. It's like ice. You had trouble walking across some of those fields.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and even all the modern computer goodies and stuff. I mean, they're limited by street tires.
Yes, they're limited by street tires. Now, one of the advantages in the tread lightly idea, of course, is that the new vehicle with its microprocessing that goes on through every possible revolution of a wheel is trying to avoid slippage, which means you avoid tearing up land.
Well, mind you, apples to apples, you put street tires on a legacy Defender, it's probably going to rip things up worse.
Oh, absolutely. It most certainly will, because we're talking about torque pulling it all apart, right?
Right.
Gonna just give it more. Give it more. It'll be fine.
Yeah, and an enthusiast behind the wheel too. So
there's that. Yeah.
It should make it out of this. Well, I don't understand why why I'm stuck.
The feeling that came out of that event was that Land Rover Corporate knows it has a great sales success in the Defender, but it sees that it really has a community of people who want to see the brand succeed. So to find Land Rover's executives talking with club executives or officers, or just the enthusiasts who've been active with Land Rover for decades. Boy, that was a great feeling, and that has been a long time coming.
I do know, helping out with the Anarch Diamond Jubilee, Bob did talk to Land Rover. There is some discussions. I don't know where they are at the moment, but there's discussions that Land Rover wants to get involved and help out with the Diamond Jubilee, which goes to your point.
Yes, it was really a glowing moment. Coming on the heels of the Trek, coming on the heels of the consumer trophy events at Asheville and the Land Rover Experience up in Manchester, Vermont. This is really a change, guys. We're not being told that our vehicle can take us to the spa anymore. I'm very happy to hear that.
Yes. Any idea where that's coming from? Is that coming from the UK? Is that coming from India? Is it more of a North America thing?
Well, first off, no, I think it's coming from the reception to the new Defender. So, we were talking about the growth in and re-energizing of club events after the pandemic. Well, Land Rover didn't plan it that way, but it launches a new Defender model right at the beginning of the pandemic when everyone says, I can't fly anywhere, but I could go drive and camp. What am I going to do that in? How about this one? The timing was exquisite, but the vehicle itself is apparently having no sales resistance outside of lack of availability and the need for people who are not used to waiting for a vehicle to wait. I think it's the confluence of it all, John. But what's really nice is to hear Land Rover's North America's people talking about the things they would like to see Land Rover owners doing. When you talk to them, they all go camping in their Land Rovers. And these are people who didn't necessarily think before that, but they're doing it. And that is different. That is very different, Harold. Yeah, very different. Even though we know that a lot of new Defenders are essentially running between suburbs and cities and running errands rather than adventures, the fact is you can step right into it and without an apology to anyone, go and take that 1,000-mile trip.
Which people have done.
Which lots of people have done.
Get in the vehicle and off you go.
Well, that's how I like to buy them. I fly in somewhere and jump in something I've never sat in before and turn the key. It starts. Okay, I'm going home. See ya.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I did that too. To all this, John, it just points to me, and I think the Destination Defender event was just a perfect example of this. It points to me that there is now an understanding of value between Land Rover's club enthusiast group and Land Rover's new vehicle owner group who are merging together. An enthusiast is an enthusiast. It doesn't really matter what you drive.
It's good to see that they're supporting the community.
Yes, it really is. It really is. I think I tip my cap to them. The Trek competitions are not inexpensive to run, and they're not inexpensive for the dealer. You have to buy vehicles and you have to sell them later. But the fact is that over half the Land Rover dealers in the country participate.
And that Destination Defender event, I'm sure, was not cheap either to put on.
I'm confident it was because it was a great event. And boy, just as enthusiastic and as fun as any great club event is. It really had that same feeling to it.
Do you think some of this has to do with the 75th anniversary coming up next year? Are they trying to get behind the community to help support the heritage through 75 years of Land Rover and maybe getting behind some of these events?
Well, I think they will, John. And I commend you and the other board members of that ANARC, the Association of North American Rover Clubs, for stepping forward and inviting Land Rover to participate and presenting the case as to why they should. I don't see that the 75th is drawing the attention. Even, I'm told by UK correspondents, the clubs there aren't hearing much from Land Rover UK about what they're going to do. I'm always reminded, Harold, you're probably equally familiar with this. I'm always reminded that despite the presence of Land Rover in our lives as enthusiasts, it's a very small company. By automotive standards, it's a peanut. So when I say, I can remember before ANARC revamped itself and became an organization again and took on the Diamond Jubilee, I can remember talking to Land Rover corporate people here in the US. Are you planning anything for the 75th yet? Oh, no, that's way too far in advance. Really? It's not that long from now.
No.
And
what
what they're really saying is that the planning for things like Destination Defender, the Trek, the trophies, they just don't have a lot of people to do that. Even the Destination Defender turns out to have been thought about, but really the design, putting the action to the ground to make it happen, it was really kind of last minute in some ways. And not because they didn't care. They just don't have anybody.
It'd be interesting to see if the results of these events and the response to them will make them think about doing more planning for these things.
I think it has to, first you have to demonstrate that it matters. And we always have to remember, Harold, at the corporate end, beware of what you wish for. So, for example, if you drum up tremendous interest in the Land Rover Mach for its 75th anniversary, you better have some Land Rovers to sell.
Right.
You don't.
And they have a large backlog of vehicles to sell.
When you look at the various social media groups around new Defender owners or new Land Rover owners, people are thrilled. Within 6 months, my Land Rover arrived, one of them posted. Like, that was good.
I see that. You see that often. You do.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and it goes to, the big changes that have occurred with, replacing the CEO and others leaving the company. There's that backlog. Why did we have the backlog? And having problems with securing chips. It's critical to business. That
part of the business, which is kind of hidden from us because as heritage enthusiasts, we know who the parts suppliers are. You can generally get those parts. You're not really hung up that often compared to somebody whose brand new Defender just came without a set of features because that chip isn't available and didn't come at a reduced cost. But John, go back, and Harold, go back to when the NAS Defenders in the 90s were available and the dealers couldn't give them away. So they're only bringing in about 1,700 a year, and they actually couldn't move them. That's why there was a 98.
Yeah. And now you have to be a millionaire to buy one.
Yes.
Used, you have to be a millionaire.
Yeah. This is why I think there might be a little less emphasis on promoting the 75th, because you really have to have the product to support a promotion, or all it does is build antagonism.
Interesting point.
Think of the launch, for example, of the new Bronco, which certainly numerically has been quite successful. But then Ford has run into production problems with them, such that they have to either recall a slew of them or they're holding them off because they can't get certain components to be built correctly by suppliers. Land Rover owners might be willing to wait because there've never been a lot of Land Rovers available, but Ford buyers aren't.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. My uncle had to wait 6 months for the new Maverick.
Oh, the truck. Yeah.
Yeah. He wanted one. He's a Ford guy. That will never change.
Well, not everybody in the family, John, is as wise, as thoughtful, as intelligent, personable as you. Yeah. He must be the black sheep of your family.
Let you tell him that. He's nearly 90 years old. You will not be able to convince him otherwise. Speaking of availability of vehicles, Land Rover has a backlog of like 200,000 vehicles, it said, for the Defender and the new Range Rover. But, the vehicle we don't talk about too much lately is a Discovery. And I think part of that is because, they have trouble getting pushing out the new products that they have, but the one that's been sitting there that probably does need a refresh and it's time for a refresh of the Discovery. I think they haven't put anything behind it because they can't support it because we can't manufacture it for reasons we just discussed. But have you heard anything about the Discovery?
Well, there's no question whether I talk to Land Rover North America staff and execs or whether it's from reading UK observations about the Discovery. The Discovery kind of lost away when the Defender kind of muscled into Discovery territory. So the new Defender, in its likely seating, in its capacities, in its performance, equals, if not exceeds in some ways, the need for a Discovery. So comfort, roadability, noise, vibration, harshness levels of the new Defender mean I don't really need to look at a Discovery unless I happen to like its looks. And one of the challenges for the Discovery, the current generation Discovery, was that in its dramatic change from the Alpine windowed boxiness that we adore.
Yeah, it's what makes a disco a disco.
It instantly recognizable. And it became a vehicle whose styling, whose design did not really come up with a reason to change to the new model. In fact, if you remember, the LR4 sales in the US skyrocketed the last year that model was available because the real enthusiasts said, hey, if they're not going to make any more, I better get one more. They took a hit. That new design, which mirrored unintentionally the designing and styling of some competitive models in terms of brand awareness, really hurt that lineup. And the new Defender is almost too Discovery-like. There are enthusiasts who suggest it should have really been launched as a Discovery. Why not give us the same kind of boxy hand-built Defender that we always loved, body on frame type of.
Or just kill the Defender and just make this a disco.
Yes, in other words, what we call the Defender now should have really been the new Discovery, and you should have something different for the Defender.
Well, either that, or if you can't make a something that's boxy and more true to the thing, just don't make it.
But the Discovery, Land Rover put a lot of energy and deservedly succeeded in making the Discovery quite the sales success for the brand. So it's put a lot of marketing and financial equity into creating the Discovery lineup. The Sport still sells pretty well. It's the larger Discovery, which moves somewhat up market as the Range Rover skyrocketed up market. But then Land Rover at the time, under Ralph Spaeth's leadership, came out with the Velar, which took some place as to why would I want to have a Discovery when I, for about the same price, could get a Velar and it would have the Range Rover name on it. Now, if there is one model lineup that you wonder, will it continue? It's the Velar, the Range Rover Velar. The Discovery is due in 25 or 26, I'm told, for a substantial revamp to the point of actually identifying what were the qualities of the original Discovery that made it compelling as a sales item, not just in the US, but worldwide. It reached its million Discovery mark a lot faster than some other Land Rover vehicles did, than most other ones did. The Discovery took what you guys know, what we all know, was essentially the Defender, NAS Defender package, put it in a different body, kept it compact in length and width, used height to its advantage, and promptly said, here's a family vehicle that will do almost everything that utilitarian, somewhat leaky Defender 90 will do, or 110 will do. And we'll do it in a much more family-friendly manner. Well, when the new Defender comes out, it turns out to be a vehicle equal in its capabilities. So the question would be, what's the Discovery offer? I think that when they look at redesigning whatever the plans are, they're being quite quiet about it. When they look at it, they recognize that they have to identify the reasons you would want a Discovery. So it'll have to offer capabilities and or drivability that are somewhat compromised in the Defender. But it is due. There's no question it's due. And Land Rover does not want to, that's a valuable model line, particularly in the rest of the world for Land Rover.
But also, I don't think it's going to get that attention until they can fulfill orders of the current models either.
Well, it is getting the attention, John. They really are talking about 25 or 26.
Well, hopefully then by then they would have all their issues sorted out by then.
I'm sure that's part of the thinking is surely this chip shortage and the supply chain problems won't last that long. We've heard that before, so let's hope they're right.
Yeah, if anybody needs some help in that area, certainly it's a Land Rover. But I do wonder where, there was original discussion several years ago of having the different families. You had your Range Rover family, you were going to have a Discovery family and a Defender family. But it seems over time that the Defender being successul, the family has grown not just with multiple models, but also I think in its trim levels, so that you can get one for 50,000 or you can get one for 100,000.
Yes.
So whereas you would almost have thought that, well, the Defender would be kind of your entry level Land Rover, and then you would step up to a Discovery, then you could go up to a Range Rover. But now that Defender seems to cover all that range, what do you need a Disco for?
If you remember, John, in the 90s, the price being asked for an NAS Defender was staggeringly high, whether it was the 110 or the 90. That was unaffordable new unless you really had a fairly comfortable income. Certainly, I couldn't have thought of one. We have to remember the Land Rover has never really been an entry-level product of any sort. Even when Land Rover talks about the coil-sprung $50,500-something coil-sprung Defender 90 available without much electrical optioning, it's still a very capable vehicle. This is not like buying a cheap Wrangler. We just have to remember that since we generally deal and love vehicles that are 15 to 25 years old, well, they seem inexpensive because compared to the new cost of a new vehicle, they are inexpensive to start with. But that's not the actual price market that we deal with.
Right. Although I do have to correct you on one thing, Jeff. The Freelander was supposed to be an entry-level Land Rover. It was mid-level.
Yeah, yes, it was mid-level by the time it got here. But again, it was entry, but it was entry into that plateau. It was never meant to go after the Ford Mondeo crowd.
Correct. Yes. Even though it was partly a Ford Mondeo. Anyway, we'll move on from that. But okay, so that's just interesting that at least they're giving some attention to the Disco, and hopefully they'll figure that out because, it has, I think it would have gotten more attention sooner had it not been for their production problems.
Yes, it might have, but it also, they're recognizing truthfully just how successful the Defender is.
But the thing you'd heard for years, sorry to interrupt you there, but the thing I heard for years is that the Disco had 7 seats, and now you've come out with a Defender 130, which has 7 seats, pushing the Disco further away.
Well, and I think part of the success for the Disco here in this country was that you could buy a Disco where you couldn't get or couldn't afford a Defender for many years. So I think that drove the sales of the Disco quite a bit in this country.
Excellent point.
Well, but in the 90s, the Discovery was about the same price as a Defender. They were in the high 20s in the 90s. And then, of course, the Defender stops. Then the Discovery became our faux Defender, if you will, because it was still available with that package.
Right, because you could get it where you couldn't get a new Defender after those first couple of years.
Right, and the Range Rover pricing scheme was always above what the enthusiasts might be able to or desirous of spending.
Above and beyond, I think, are the official words.
That was a pricing issue, too.
So next year is 2023, Land Rover's 75th anniversary. What do you see happening in North America in particular for club events and for activities going on? I know SCAR has announced their event already in Texas, and I wonder what else is on your radar.
Well, of course, boldly, I predict that the Maine Winter Romp will remain as positively entertaining as it's been for its past 26 years. The last year's event had 130, 140 registrations, and despite being cold and dank and so on, like Maine is in the winter, people still travel considerable distances to do the event. You mentioned the south central area Rover Rally, the Scar Rally, the Texas Rovers, their big event. It's back, going to be in the same location. But once again, there's a great opportunity in controlled settings for the new enthusiasts to bring the new vehicle. And I have a hunch we'll see a lot more of them. They've been very successful sold there. I know that the Sand Rover Rally, which is mid-April and not conflicting with the Rover Owners of Virginia's Wintergreen event, is going to have some dynamic changes this coming year to broaden both its appeal. It's the Florida Panhandle region. It's a beautiful area, but they are really looking to make it more Rover-centric than just coming to sit on the beach with your car, which is highly entertaining, particularly when you live in New England in March and April.
Right.
But
it's quite the getaway.
It's a great excuse.
It's April 14th through the 16th in 2023.
Oh, so file your taxes and then go to Florida.
But it is. I've talked with the fellow who's taken over the organization of it at the request of the original organizer, and he did a great job last year. But he's really looking to broaden the appeal of the event with different activities. And I'm told by folks who are at the Gulf Coast Land Rover Club out of Mobile, Alabama, Charles Bell's group, that they're enthusiastic proponents for this Sand Rover Rally and very excited about some of the potential changes that have been discussed. So once again, it gets a great turnout and is a great way for Deep South enthusiasts to actually enjoy their Rovers. There's also a resurgence of interest out of the Florida Land Rover Club. And I would think that if I could milk an invitation in the dead of winter from them, that I would just be obligated to take it on.
I'm sure if you just showed up, they'd be happy to have you. I don't think you need an invitation.
Whereas Pittsburgh is really tropical in the dead of winter, Maine is decidedly colder. And
Well, I think you might want to start driving that Series 2 right now. You might make it in time.
Am I making it time for an
And SCAR, just to close the loop, SCAR is March 30th through April 2nd, 2023.
Yes, they moved it back there that's the same as last year. That's a terrific event because the terrain at that Barnwell Mountain off-road park really challenges you, but it rarely doesn't get wet. And if it does rain, as it has during the event for a brief time, that soil just soaks it all up. It's also dry there. So you can do the kinds of climbs that we can only imagine in the pine needle covered trails of the East Coast. Really try some rock climbing and so on that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise out here. Those events stand out, but I also know that both the Southern California Club and the Northern California Club are inviting people to consistently go out and enjoy some of their multi-day adventure treks. There's also a new club in New Mexico. The New Mexico Land Rover Club has started up again and is doing some wonderful things in the Albuquerque area. I know there'll be another national rally that the Solar Health Society will organize. And I think there'll be a great outpouring of these sorts of activities around the 75th because everybody can galvanize around that 75th year.
Speaking of the 75th, will we see you at the Anarch Diamond Jubilee?
You will, because Rovers Magazine is going to cover it very completely, and because Rovers North, the parent company, along with Atlantic British, Lucky 8, and several smaller but really significant parts suppliers are sponsoring various portions of the event. So I will be building a trials course, which is going to be the Rovers North Trials course, and it's going to be an extensive one, even more than we did at Mar. So I'll be out there digging holes as well as recording and interviewing.
What do you intend to drive?
I drove the QE1, my 66 2A, to the 50th that was at Greek Peak, and I think it needs to return.
I think that's an excellent idea. That's an excellent idea.
It could either be that or the 109. It's just a matter of which I feel to spend 14 hours of driving in.
Well, get a buddy to come with you and take both.
Well, yes, except the buddies that I would invite to take with me already have their own Land Rovers and one of theirs.
All right.
Well, you could get the Disco to tow the QE1, QE2.
Don't talk like that. Don't. John, somebody has hacked into the podcast and his versions on Land Rovers.
No, not at all. I'm in the nicest way. So you'd have two there. One person could transport both.
Thoughtful, kind of a Weasley explanation for what you really meant to say about. But I will take it in good graces. No, we will. I would love to bring the QE1 out. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I think that's just an invitation for a smite down from the Rover gods if you try that trick.
No, the disco will blow up or something like that.
The lights will go out and you're like, wait a minute, there's no engine.
That could happen.
Well, yeah, I think that's an invitation for a head gasket loss, if nothing else.
Incidentally, speaking of not repairs, but speaking of the Discoveries, we should let everyone know what, in case, I'm sure they do know, but in case you don't, the refurbishment and restorations of Discovery 1s and 2s is really going full bore. You think Defenders and series trucks are getting rebuilt at a rapid rate. It's amazing to see what people are doing to keep their heritage Discoveries alive.
Well, we're running out of viable ones to drive without restoring them. So yeah. we're having to put some money into them, and the values are coming up accordingly.
Yes, it is. It is amazing to see what they fetch compared to, say, when I bought my Disco 1 6 years ago now. Frankly, it was for a song because people thought it was dead, just needed a couple of parts, and nobody wanted to put the money into it.
Yeah, those are getting hard to find now.
They are getting hard to find, yes.
So prices have rebounded then? I guess demand is increasing?
They are certainly rebounding, yeah. I mean, these are, $8,000 to $20,000 vehicles now if they are running and in reasonable condition, yeah. That's the asking price that I routinely see. I don't know what they get, but they do pass hands. And what really hurt us in the Discovery world was the Cash for Clunkers program during the Great Recession of 2008.
Well, and that killed off the remaining fleet of Freelanders in this country too.
Yeah, it did. Did you all know that at the Mid-Atlantic Rally this past year, a Freelander was raffled off? The Freelander arrived at Ralph Serrick's shop, Serrick Auto Work, right outside of Richmond, Virginia. It was available for a very inexpensive cost because it was a Freelander, and it was assumed that it was going to die quickly, so let's get rid of it. Well, it actually turned out to be structurally in sound condition, and it turned out in its interior to be in fine shape. It is blue. So Ralph Serrick decided to make it a fundraising raffle to support Rove for the club. I'm still annoyed I didn't win, but an enthusiast whom I met at the Defender Trophy event that was held at Land Rover Experience Asheville a couple of years ago. His name is Andrew Gurwitz, lives in the Washington, D.C. area. And his son, whose name eludes me, is a Defender owner. And Andrew, I want to say, was a Range Rover owner. I believe he has a new Defender now, too. But he won. And we promptly drove the thing around the muddy course to show that actually they're rather capable little things. For many people there, it was the first Freelander you had actually seen in person in a long time.
And it was perhaps the last.
Perhaps so. But it was a delightful thing. Andrew was quite chuffed at winning it. And I believe it was trailed back to Serrick to just finish up some maintenance work that Ralph wanted to have done before he passed it along. But it's a hoot to see them. And I'm confident, John, there must be some efforts to bring some Freelanders or LR2s to this Diamond Jubilee.
There are. If board decided that Freelanders is really kind of a Dixon-inspired idea, because, his thought that there are more Series 1 80 inches that are running around North America than there are functioning Freelanders running around North America. So that's where this whole idea got started. It has been decided that a Series 1 or a Freelander as a second vehicle, that's not, unfortunately, not the primary vehicle, but as a second vehicle, will receive free entry to the Anarch event. Yeah, so that was what was decided. I did push for any vehicle getting in, but it was decided it would have to be a second vehicle. So Series 1 owners, if that's your second vehicle that you're bringing to the Jubilee, or if it's a Freelander as the second vehicle, that I think it's a $40 additional charge for a second Land Rover at the Diamond Jubilee. You would then get comped on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking somebody's actually gone to the trouble and taken that risk, and they've driven a Freelander across the country to get to this thing. They deserve a prize, not just free entry.
You know, we forget, because it didn't sell well here and certainly was taxed by American driving standards, how successful the Freelander 1 and the Freelander 2 were for Land Rover in the 90s and 2000s in the rest of the world.
Exactly. I keep trying to remind people that the mighty Freelander, and it was very appropriate that one showed back up at Pearl's Pond, because I took my very first Mars. I took my Freelander 2 in Pearl's Pond. Oh, absolutely. The 0506 monsoons, I had the Freelander there.
I think there's still some mud underneath it somewhere from that too.
Probably is, actually. The way they made the rear bumper wrapped around, it was a wonderful scoop when you were reversing, and you would just pull all the mud and clay.
Pretty much a road grader.
One other event you haven't discussed, because we haven't discussed too much about it in detail, but is the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. I'm in a consultation with the organizers of that, and we're going to have a Land Rover showcase at the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix.
Congratulations.
That will take place in mid to late July. Our listeners know we're inviting Land Rover owners to come to the Vintage Grand Prix. We'll have more details soon. Been in consultation and need to get up a plan. And they're now starting their planning activities for the Vintage Grand Prix this year.
Well, that's fabulous, John. Congratulations on making that happen.
I anticipate we'll have a lap around the course, which is, I think, would be a cool thing. That'd be kind of cool. We'll take all the Land Rovers and make a lap around.
So I think it'd be nice if we show up and record a segment for the show at the Grand Prix and get some of our listeners who have come to the event and get them on and give them their 2 minutes of fame.
That's a great idea. It's in Pittsburgh proper, right?
Pittsburgh proper. Absolutely. Yes, it is.
That's not a terrible flight from Maine. I'll think about that.
You need to drive on down. You can bring your disco.
Yeah, they have that nice, comfortable ride.
Takes Morgan about 6 hours, I think. I know for me it's 6 hours from Greek Peak, maybe 5. So that gives you an indication how long it takes you to get to Greek Peak. Well, it takes me like 12 hours to get to the Winter Romp.
Well, why don't you carpool or convoy with Morgan? Get a whole group from the New England area to convoy down to the Grand Prix.
The convoy idea is a great one, and I know it's being discussed 75th to get different groups to actually convoy there together. Or if you can't go because you can't get the time, why not join a convoy in your region for the part of the trip you can do? That's great fun. I want to encourage the Centresteer podcast to take a lead role in designing a online event for April 30th, 2023.
Land Rover Day.
Thank you. Exactly. We need to have an online event from around the country. We need to invite people to log in, talk briefly about your Land Rover, maybe show a little video from your Land Rover. Maybe we encourage people to make a little video like Scar did to encourage attendance last year.
I appreciate the challenge. We will.
Yeah.
We will.
Well, two years ago, we did that stay-at-home Rover rally during the pandemic. So this could be something else we do.
I could be great at it. And just to be able to have a venue where you can celebrate that tremendous day in 1988.
Even a virtual venue.
Oh, totally virtual. I'm thinking of it as virtual. Yeah. I would be surprised if Land Rover did not do something like they've done, a live broadcast, online broadcast on Land Rover.
They did that thing for the 70 that was pretty big.
Yes. Yep. And I have a hunch they'll continue. But again, I haven't heard a peep, and neither have the British clubs, really. So, John, here's what you do. You invite people to receive a Centresteer decal, provided that you will then create a 30-second video of you and your Land Rover while you love it, and it has to be seen.
This past year, is there any standouts in Rovers magazine that you'd like to call highlight to that you covered? Or
Of course, every article in Rovers magazine is a literary masterpiece.
I know that. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cast any aspersions upon the writing or editing of Rovers magazine. I just thought one maybe rose above the top, the kind of the creme de la creme.
The interesting pieces that really stand out are what some enthusiasts did. The Barbara Toy tribute run of Bill and Patty Cooper, taking their Series 1, using their new Defender as a cover car, if you will, the backup. That's the one that eventually even had to tow because of time. They didn't have 3 weeks is not enough when you want to spend some time also at some of the locations. But if anything showed just how remarkable a Land Rover is, it's taking a 57 Series 1 across the country. Truly remarkable. And this wasn't one rebuilt to concours standards in any way. And they did a delightful thing, and they really honored a remarkable woman in Barbara Toy from the 1950s and her multi-continental treks. I also just want to highlight, because it was highly entertaining, and that is the growth of these starting small events that are suddenly blossoming. Dave Sweetapple's Vermont Rovers group, as informal a thing as it can be, decides to have a little bit of off-roading followed by a weenie roast, literally a hot dog roast on a bonfire in a field in Vermont. And 75 people show up, with it being announced about 3 weeks prior to it happening, from all over New England. And I know these kinds of things are being replicated. Rick Olson, out of the Minnesota Land Rover Club, has run a tour of the Great Lakes, a circumnavigation of the Great Lakes. I think they focus on Lake Superior. So it's about 1,000 miles of driving in heritage vehicles. Yes, they're on road for the most part. This is something where you just jump in and say, I'll be gone a week in a vehicle that I might not drive every day, and just go do it. Harold, I mean, this is right up your alley here.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that they handled that was really superb. I think they were just a brilliant, those two kinds of things, where the Montana group is routinely running long trips through the high desert and mountains in Montana.
I don't think there's any other kind of trip in Montana, but a long trip.
The kind of thing that you might associate with. I couldn't do that because there are no roads there or something. Well, there are roads. They may be just tracks, and they may be fire roads or unnamed trails that are public. But people are doing this all the time, and I never want to lose sight of just how impactful that is for the brand, as well as for the enthusiasm that the vehicle brings. I'm sure that I know, for example, the Lake Superior tour could easily be done in a pickup truck. It's not aggressive off-roading per se, but it's saying that decades old vehicles that I have, I can jump in, bring a few parts, you never know, and I can just go take a 1,000-mile trip in. And
it's not the road or the traction. It's the fact that you're able to do that and make it.
Yeah. And you will make it. It's this range, John, that I just think heralds so much success for 2023 for the Land Rover enthusiast community as a whole, regardless of which Land Rover they're in.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much for making your return once again for our State of Land Roverdom. It's just great having a nice conversation with you about what's going on in the past year with things that you've encountered. I was asked by Bob, our mutual friend Bob, to make sure that you had put enough logs on the fire. You didn't get cold.
I've been sitting here shivering because, as I mentioned to you prior to starting the show, as an EMT, I have found myself on like 24 hours of calls. I have not been able to light the wood stove, and I'm too cheap to turn the furnace on very high. So I
didn't know you had a furnace. I thought it was strictly the wood.
At one time it was, but I'm in a different location. Neither sleet, nor snow, nor rain, nor the cold of night will stop me from my appearance on the Centresteer podcast.
Well, on that note, Jeff, thanks very kindly. Appreciate it as always. Look forward to seeing you throughout the year at various events.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Harold. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all Land Rover enthusiasts everywhere.
We hope you enjoyed show number 117. Thanks to Jeff Aronson for joining us and giving us the state of Rover for 2022 and I guess even into 2023. Hopefully you'll get out to an event if you're here in North America and you can say hi to Jeff. Tell him you heard him on the podcast.
Maybe buy him a brown water.
He does like the brown water too. So yes, buy him a brown water. And thanks to Harold, Morgan, and Dixon. Thanks for joining us again on the podcast. And we had the full house.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you for yet another year. Although technically our anniversary is not yet, but calendar
We're
year.
closing in on it.
It is not coincidental to April.
Well, technically, that March will be our 120th episode, so that will be a full 10 years of doing this.
And next month, George Bull will be back. He returns with his North American adventures. And also thanks to the One True Pax for his continued production support and helping us with our audio. If you see him, tell him to get his Rover ready. So we expect to see him at these events. Right, Pax? You hear me, Pax? Visit our website, Centresteer.com, to listen to previous shows and for show notes, which have links to stories discussed in today's podcast. We post a new podcast at the end of every month. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, voicemail, and you can directly support the show at patreon.com/Centresteer. You can also buy us a t-shirt, sticker, or even a tea/brown water. Go to our website, click on store in the menu of our webpage. And if you have an idea for a guest, send us the details and the contact information. If you have it, we would appreciate that. And in honor of Land Rover's 75th anniversary, we are inviting you to bring your Land Rover, especially Series and Defender owners, should I add Freelanders to that, to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix in 2023. You have 6 months to prepare and 5 months for an ARC's Diamond Jubilee.
6 and 5.
5 is the number, and the number is 5.
This is us bullying you publicly on the podcast to join us for one or both events.
You have 5 months to get something to the Greek Peak, and then another month to shove it the rest of the way to Pittsburgh.
That's right.
Well, like I said last time, at least it's downhill from Greek Peak to Pittsburgh. Just need a head start push and
We'll push.
maybe remove a floor panel and go all Flintstones on it.
Well, maybe I could just tow you back from Greek Peak. At least I'll tow you up the hills.
That will end well. That will end very well.
It'll go so well. It'll go so well. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover. Until next time, I ask you to share the show with one other Land Rover enthusiast, especially during the holiday season.
Thanks for listening. You may now resume your important things.
There's a lot of distortion on the line. What I was going to say